The world is turned upside down. Things are the opposite of what they used to be, or at least seem like they're the opposite. 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4 anymore. The left is right and the right is left. Ideas like truth and facts can't even be agreed upon. Reaching agreement on a simple fact is like trying to hold water in your hand, an impossibility. The moral order has been inverted, if any moral code exists anymore at all, as many believe we've fallen that far. Maybe that's you. And the only way back is a vertigo-inducing counter-revolution. Anger, stress, anxiety, and division are all running high. Somehow, some way, we need to seek and find wisdom and understanding of this cataclysmic shift in life. We need to make sense of what is going on. This brings us to the crux of the podcast series, Echoes of Tyranny, How Fiction Became Our Reality. Dystopian literature should be mandatory reading because it holds secrets that governments try to hide from us to maintain power, and it explains what happens to everyday people in a society that has been turned upside down. Right in front of our faces, these narratives reveal the potential consequences of unchecked authority and societal complacency. If only we would just reach out and grab the knowledge. By opening the right books, identifying the signs, making proper decisions, we gain a deeper and a more profound understanding of our messed up world, and more importantly, make more educated decisions as we react to things shoveled down our throats forcibly, as well as things that are more subtly used to manipulate our minds and decisions. This knowledge is available to us if we just simply search, study, and read. This series is all about where we are in society today. How very smart people in prior eras could see, before it even happened, how technology, industrialization, commercialization, and the unholy alliance of business, money, and government fused into this cancerous bond can bring even the most eloquent and intellectually sound democracies of the Western world to the brink of collapse. The American Constitution and Declaration of Independence, for example, two of the most beautifully and brilliant constructs in history, but they mean nothing in the real world unless we defend the ideals. Intellectual ideas are great and they're fine, but sadly, they mean nothing if they're not put into practice in the real world. You need to understand dystopian literature because, it's our reality. So let's begin. Imagine a world, just for a moment, where your every single move is monitored, where fear is both your constant companion and your prison. Picture a society where truth is twisted beyond comprehension, individuality is crushed, and hope itself is a dangerous act of defiance. Things are so bad that people no longer even are resentful or angry about how those in power seized control of all the wealth, all the power. There's sort of like a subservient, apathetic acceptance of life. And just I guess everything's going to be dull. It's going to be monotonous. It's going to be without freedom. It's going to be without passion. And it's going to be without any choices. Imagine a world where fear of just stating your opinion can lead to public ridicule, attack, or even job loss. Just basic statements of truth, if not said in the right crowd with the right tone of voice, can be construed as racist, sexist, homophobic, or even labeling you a conspiracy theorist or enemy of the state, which could lead to very dire consequences. Imagine a world where the perfect dictatorship masquerades as democracy, a prison without walls, where citizens wouldn't dream of escaping and and defend their prison adamantly. All the while, through relentless surveillance, manipulated messaging, and endless consumption, people comply perfectly. Some willingly, some unwillingly, with their servitude, but in general, compliance nonetheless. In our modern age, filled with technological control and the erosion of human rights and freedoms, these dystopian nightmares feel eerily prophetic. I mean, you know that as a society right now, we grapple with unchecked greed, power-hungry elites, rampant surveillance, and the suppression of dissent. The truth is, we all need to invest time and confront unsettling questions. Are we hurtling towards our own self-destruction? Are we even just pawns in a game that's controlled by some sinister cabal spanning government and culture and business? Is there even anything we can do about it? Or even darker, do we even have the will or care to confront this directly? Or is it just easier and safer to just watch the disintegration of democracy, at least democracy as we have known it, and watch it just simply die a slow and painful death? Those truths of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, are they just buzzwords now? A facade that is used to control us? These are the topics that I want to take on in this series of talks. The goal is to dissect two of the most jarring and classical dystopian novels ever written. We will use the warning signs in these literary masterpieces to draw parallels to our current world and question whether our values and behaviors are pushing us headlong into the actual dystopian reality that we see in these novels. Or maybe you might even decide we're already there. And importantly, what we, as citizens of the world, can we do to reverse course? Is it even possible to reverse course? We will look back in time in search of answers about our future. And I hope this podcast series is more than just some literary exploration for you. It's a sort of wake-up call to help you identify, recognize, analyze the things that are going on in our world today. First of all, welcome back to the Intellectual Freedom Podcast, or maybe it's welcome for the very first time. As you heard from the introduction, the Intellectual Freedom Podcast is we're taking a turn here. I want to walk you through a gateway into dystopian fiction. It's very unsettling and often eerily accurate worlds that you live in right now. I've been inspired to do this because, well, in our modern world today, it's not breaking news that it feels like things are falling apart. And lately, I've been rereading and restudying some of these dystopian figures and the ideas and the writings. And so I felt compelled to jump into this. It's probably going to be my most comprehensive podcast series that I've ever done, and the most detailed podcast series I've ever done. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm Dr. David Hopkins. I'm your host and your guide. I'm a humanities professor. I'm a content creator and a podcaster. And right out of the gate, I'll tell you, I'm an expert of nothing. I'm a true generalist by nature. But after a far too long hiatus from publishing any new content, focusing on some college work and some studies into artificial intelligence, I'm thrilled to bring you a new series of episodes diving deep into the prophetic works of dystopian novels and philosophies. And more importantly to you, how this applies to your life today. And in these episodes, we're going to dissect this genre and its haunting relevance to our current reality. And even today, as I set up this podcast series, I think you're going to see right out the gate where we are in many ways living this right now. So let's jump into it. So what are ideas? When I say dystopian literature, what am I talking about? Well, if you go into the movie world, you're talking like the Hunger Games series, or maybe even old school Terminator type films. And there's themes and there's ideas that they play out over and over and over again. Anytime you pick up any type of dystopian literature or you watch a movie, they're there. And so let me just run through a list so you get a little flavor of what we're going to be looking at and analyzing as we go forward, not only in the literature, but in our modern world. So totalitarianism and oppression. This is maybe the biggest and the most prevalent one. We're going to look at how governments use propaganda, surveillance, and fear to suppress dissent and maintain power. Dissent, quite frankly, is not accepted in the end when we look at this literature. And when a person or a group, when they finally step out of line and they challenge this authority, if they do it in just the wrong way, well, they learn very quickly that there are consequences to those actions. They're often very dire, and they're very deadly consequences for not being one of the sheep in the flock of the totalitarian regime. Another key theme that we're going to look at is surveillance and loss of privacy. Many dystopian narratives feature pervasive surveillance, where individuals' actions and even their thoughts are monitored every single second of every day. We know we have a lot of that going on in our society right now. Dehumanization, another theme, dehumanization and loss of individuality. See, in dystopian societies, almost exclusively, they prioritize this idea of a collective over any individual. This strips people of their identity and reduces them to cogs in the machine or components of the state or the system. They don't have any intrinsic personal value. And usually we see some sort of a caste or a hierarchy whereby the average person is put into this predetermined role and they're forced to sacrifice their individuality for societal stability. Another theme, environmental degradation and resource scarcity. So dystopian literature often focus on things like ecological collapse and the struggle for survival. When worlds are ravaged and their resources are becoming increasingly scarce, well, the ones to suffer are you and I, the average people, because as resources dwindle, those with the power, those with the control, those pulling the strings of government are the ones that get the privilege, and the rest of us are left to eke out a very meager existence. Another one is technological control and dehumanization. So the intersection of humanity and technology. Wow, that theme is prominent. It's prominent in dystopian literature, but it surely is prominent in our world right now today. And what we usually see is this technology leads to the dehumanization of society. And many dystopian novels explore the ethical implications of things like artificial intelligence or tools and weapons and technology that are a few have access to, but the rest don't. And so there's this blurring between the technology have and have-nots, or the blurring between humans and machines. That's a key theme. Another key theme that we're going to study is social stratification and inequality. We have equality in our society today, and dystopian fiction frequently examines extreme social hierarchies and those resulting injustices. And, the Hunger Games, which was written by Susan Collins, you get this series of a society that is divided up into districts. And these districts are very different in their living conditions. And the very affluent, the very wealthy. They live in the capital, and they exploit and oppress the poorer districts for resources, or sometimes maybe they're just exploiting them for the mere pleasure and joy of it, a societal distraction. Does that happen today? I'll leave it for you to decide, but I think we could maybe come up with some examples. Propaganda and control of information. The manipulation of truth and information is an absolutely critical theme in dystopian literature, and it highlights how those in power, how they shape reality, change fact to fiction or fiction back to fact over and over again using tools of manipulation, whether it would be a media source, whether it would be a politician or some other tool. Propaganda and control of information we see over and over again. And here's one of the most fascinating things that we're going to look at is, in all dystopian literature, eventually the common people, the average people, at least someone, if not an entire group, rise up. And so many dystopian stories include this resistance against the oppressive regimes. There's something inside of them that stirs them to say, this is not right, I'm not going to accept it. And these characters often seek to reclaim their freedom and their individuality. And these protagonists then, they challenge the status quo, and sometimes it leads to victory, but quite frequently, unfortunately, especially in traditional literary sense, it leads to torture, exile, and frequently death. It's a very important theme. Psychological manipulation and mind control. So the techniques of psychological control and the indoctrination, they are explored very deeply, and we are going to spend a lot of time on that. And it demonstrates how regimes maintain power by manipulating thoughts and emotions. There was a haunting movie. It's an older movie. It's not new. I think it came out in the late 80s, early 90s, I believe. Don't quote me on it. A movie called Clockwork Orange. And in this particular movie, the protagonist undergoes behavior modification, raising questions about free will and morality. And if you want to see a dark movie, Clockwork Orange is right there for you. So, but as I rattle off these ideas and these concepts and these themes, I know in your own life and in your own observations of just things going on, you could surely rattle off concrete and apparent examples of these features of dystopian literature in our modern world right now. This, my friends, is what we will explore in this podcast series. Now, to fully immerse yourself in our discussions, I do have a recommendation for you. Not a requirement. These podcasts can stand alone all they want, but I would challenge you to read or reread two amazing pieces of literature. George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. You may even be able to find them free online at some online database, because they're older. They're from the early 1900s, mid 1900s. And these two texts, they're going to form the backbone of our exploration as we look to the past to understand our present and then draw conclusions about the future. But if you don't read or reread these novels, no worries. I'm going to fill in the blanks for you. But if you really truly want to get full depth and breadth of what I'm going to be talking about, I would challenge you to go ahead and read these two amazing, and they're such fun reads too. And if you don't read a lot of fiction, you will enjoy reading these. They read fast and quick, and they're just a fun read. But either way you want to do it, I'm thrilled to have you along for this journey. I've invested some significant time and energy in this, and I'm excited to bring you this series. So with that, let's just dive in and begin our exploration. Let your mind's eye envision this scene. The air is thick with the scent of decay and despair. The city of the once proud, beautiful, and strong London is now the heart of what is known as Airstrip 1. It's a grim and gray landscape. Dilapidated buildings in an embarrassing state of disrepair. They stretch endlessly across the city. Their crumbling facades are adorned with giant posters of the leader of this monstrosity, known as Big Brother. Big Brother has a square, stern, unblinking face, reminding you and everyone that walks down the street, wherever you walk at every turn, that Big Brother is watching you. But if that wasn't enough, an aggressive group known as the Thought Police, they're constantly on patrol in the streets all the time. And their presence is a constant reminder of the iron grip that the party holds over its citizens. If we're going to be honest, it's a completely joyless city. Everywhere you go, there's an oppressive silence, as people are even afraid to look at each other in the eyes. Fear just kind of hangs in the air. Telescreens, as they're called, outside and inside the homes are blaring divisive propaganda over and over. Their constant chatter and inescapable assault on the senses. They're spewing these party lines and the latest decrees and altering the past with alarming regularity. And the difference between fake news or gaslighting or truth or deepfake it's indistinguishable. People have given up trying to question authority. The sounds from the party are hate-filled, divisive rhetoric mixed with blatant lies, as truth becomes lies and lies become truth in whatever fashion best suits the state and the party at the moment. Citizens move with a sense of mechanical obedience, their faces void of expression, afraid that even a hint of a rebellious thought could betray them. Children, indoctrinated from birth, are the party's most fervent supporters, often turning in their own parents for perceived disloyalties. Life is a monotonous cycle of drudgery and fear. The Ministry of Truth, ironically named, alters historical records to fit the party's ever-changing narrative, while the Ministry of Love enforces loyalty through torture and re-education. Hope is a dangerous act of defiance. Individuality, nothing but a distant memory. The party's slogan, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, are etched into the collective psyche, a stark reminder of the twisted logic that governs this dystopian society. In Orwell's world, the very essence of humanity is under siege. Relationships are stripped of love and trust, reduced to mere functional interactions under the party's watchful eyes. The physical environment's bleakness mirrors its inhabitants' emotional desolation, where the struggle for truth and freedom is silent. It's a lonely battle against an all-powerful regime that has 100% control over everything all of the time. Orwell's 1984 was published in the year 1949. This masterpiece paints a grim picture of totalitarian regime, and it's exerting absolute control over every aspect of life. It's a world where surveillance is everywhere. Truth is malleable, and the individuality is ruthlessly suppressed. So let's break down the key elements of this novel and draw some unsettling parallels to our own world in 2024. So it's incredible that over 70 years ago, Orwell had the intuition and the intellect to see changes in society back then, that he could project or envision a reality that in many ways we are living today. So just a brief summary of 1984, our first novel of study. In this dystopian world, there's only 3 states left: Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. And the story follows this guy, Winston Smith. He's nothing but a low-ranking member of the ruling party in Oceania, and it's governed by this omnipresent and enigmatic figure. He's known as Big Brother, and the party wields total power. They employ propaganda, psychological manipulation, brutal enforcement, and they maintain this control. And Winston just happens to work at this building that's known as the Ministry of Truth, where his job is to alter historical records to fit the party's ever-changing narrative. And despite the oppressive environment, Winston harbors these thoughts, these rebellious thoughts and dreams of freedom. And he actually, as we get into the novel, he begins this forbidden relationship with a woman named Julia and seeks to join this rumored resistance movement that's ultimately going to lead to his capture and brutal re-education, which is very graphic in nature, and we will get into that at the end. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet, as the twists and turns in our story are very fascinating and fun to follow. But the key aspects: totalitarian regime, surveillance, manipulation of truth, language as a form of control. These are all things that we're going to focus on in this knowledge, in this particular novel. So they're not new to us, right? I mean, you and I, we're not new to things like the surveillance state, where this rise of surveillance technology is everywhere. Increased monitoring by our governments and by corporations, from CCTV cameras on the street corners to internet tracking. The concept of privacy is becoming increasingly obsolete. The NSA's data collection and the extensive use of facial recognition technology, these are all stark reminders of Orwell's vision. And, they also, Orwell speaks a lot about, misinformation or disinformation. Well, goodness, the fake news and misinformation in our world, it's just rampant. Politicians and media outlets, they often just distort facts or outright lie to fit their narratives, leading to a very divided society, unsure of what to believe. Have you been there? I know I've been there many times. What's truth and what's not? The phenomena of quote-unquote fake news and the power of social media to spread misinformation. These mirror the Ministry of Truth's control over information in the novel 1984, Loss of Privacy. Social media and digital media platforms collect huge amounts of personal data, often without our explicit consent. And sometimes these companies will collect that data, even knowing that they're not supposed to collect that data. This is used for targeted advertising in the simplest format, so that they can try and sell us stuff and make money off of what we do, off of our own data. But it can also be accessed by our government agencies, leading to concerns about privacy and autonomy, language and thought control, political correctness, wokeness, manipulation of language in public discourse. They echo this thing that we're going to study in this novel called newspeak, which was to replace old speak. And basically certain words and ideas, in newspeak in 1984, they just removed them completely. You can't even say the words. But in our world today, there are certain words and there are certain ideas that are increasingly restricted, or they are redefined. And as we restrict them or redefine them, we shape public perception and we limit the scope of certain debate. we have that right now in our society today. And then the dehumanization through technology. Advanced technologies, of course, are incredibly beneficial. There's some amazing things with technology. But if we really want to be honest, this social media revolution, it's actually reduced human interaction. It's reduced empathy. It's increased divisiveness. It's increased anger. The rise of AI and the automation in the workplace can make us feel as humans just like we're just cogs in this machine, in this larger system of society that just keeps dehumanizing us over and over again. So as we navigate through these troubling trends in Orwell's 1984, it should serve for us as a cautionary tale, but also more than just warning us, it should be a call to action for us, a call to be vigilant. It should remind us that the fight for truth, for privacy, and individuality, it's ongoing. The war in our society today, and so many times, it's not against another country. It's against our own country, our own government, our own elites, the power structures within trying to control us. That's the war. That's the thing we all need to be aware of. Because these creeping influences of totalitarianism is ongoing. They don't come in one huge rush. They come in incremental takeaways. And once the government takes something, they do not ever give it back. They are not going to give it back. You could hardly name any instance where a personal individual freedom was taken away by a government, and then ultimately they said, we're just going to give it back to you now. It doesn't happen. We need to be aware of these things. And these are some of the storylines for sure in our novel 1984 we're going to be talking about. Okay, so before we go any further, who is this man who created the masterpiece 1984? Because to truly grasp the depths of Orwell's 1984, we have to know a little bit about the mind of the creator, George Orwell. He was born to Eric Arthur Blair. 1903 was his birthday in British India, so he wasn't even born in England. Orwell had a diverse set of experiences from his upbringing in colonial India to his time as a officer in Burma and his involvement even in the Spanish Civil War. All these things profoundly shaped his worldview and literary works. He was raised he wasn't elite, raised in a middle-class family, educated in England, but he obviously had immense talent because he did get to attend the very prestigious school of Eton, where he felt acutely aware of the class divides of him and his fellow classmates that would later permeate his writings. His early years were marked by a sense of alienation, deep-seated disdain for oppression and injustice. And these sentiments were only heightened during his time when he was a colonial police officer in Burma, and he just witnessed the brutal realities of imperialism firsthand. Orwell's experiences fighting in the Spanish War were also very pivotal for him, and installed really a nasty opposition of totalitarianism. He saw the horrors of both the fascists and the communist regimes up close. He understood the mechanisms of propaganda and the control that these systems employed. It was this direct confrontation with the extremes of political ideology that that kind of crystallized for him his belief in the importance of truth and freedom. But if that isn't enough, living through World War II, he saw the rise of totalitarian regimes like the Nazis, and he saw the rise of the Soviet Union under Stalin. And this provided Orwell with just a stark illustration of his very worst fears. And the convergence of these historical events and personal experiences motivated him to write the novel 1984 that we are studying here in this podcast series. And not just as a work of fiction, but a dire warning to future generations. Orwell feared a world where the government could rewrite history, where governments obliterated privacy, and where individual thought was a crime. He saw it firsthand in various regimes through his entire life, and we see it spring to the pages. We see it spring to life in the pages. Orwell's motivation was deeply rooted in he had a desire to educate, yell from the mountaintops about the dangers of unchecked power and the erosion of truth. Now, ultimately, his health rapidly declined while he was writing this novel because he had tuberculosis, and he poured basically the remaining energy of his life into 1984. And Orwell's legacy is one of vigilance against the seductive allure of authoritarianism. So authoritarianism, like I said earlier, it doesn't just come and bum rush you and slam you over the head. It seduces you. Oh, we have free this. Oh, we have free that. Oh, you should give us this part of your personal rights because it's going to quote unquote make us all safe. That sort of thing is what Orwell is warning us against in this novel. And he saw some stuff. He saw some stuff from imperialism to the Spanish Civil War to World War II to the rise of the Soviet Union. He saw it all. And we see this, that, understanding Orwell's life and motivations, I think help you maybe appreciate the urgency and the fervor that he wrote 1984. His insights were not just theoretical, but they were forged in this crucible of real-world experiences and historical upheavals. But enough of Orwell in 1984 for our first discussion. We're going to do a literary and cultural comparison of Orwell to another novel, and I haven't talked as much about this one, but it's another very dark dystopian novel. But the world is a 180-degree turn from 1984 because the other dystopian world is completely opposite of Orwell's when we look at Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. It is in many ways even more horrifying, but the picture of the two novels, the description, the narrative of it couldn't be different. Both novels, they're brilliant in their own right. But in many ways, I think we can almost relate to Brave New World even more than we can relate to 1984. So now I want you to imagine a different world. I want you to imagine a world where everyone is just perpetually happy all the time. Conflict is non-existent, and life's pleasures readily available to you at all time. Sounds utopian, right? I mean, in many ways, we have keyboard warriors that will say they're revolting against XYZ cause because it's downright unjust, the horrible situation we have in America, while they're sitting in Starbucks sipping a $7 latte. Life's easy. Life's easy. And in Huxley's novel, imagine an easy life on the surface. Imagine Instagram pictures. Imagine that lovely home, the lovely vacation, the great meal that you have every Friday night when you go out with friends. But in Huxley's Brave New World, this facade of perfection, it's a lie. A very dark lie. And it conceals a chilling reality of a world that is almost completely dehumanized. And it's under control 100% by an all-powerful government. The Brave New World is set in a future where society has mastered the ability to engineer advanced reproductive technologies so that they can cast somebody at birth, even in the womb, to be whatever they want it to be when it's born and growing up and serves out its life. They've mastered psychological manipulation. And they also have mastered a drug. It's called soma. And it keeps the population placid and content. There's not a world of rule by physical force. Still, it's a world where life is controlled by pure complacency, created through a level of comfort where the mind is numb, the spirit is dull, and nothing matters but a hedonistic fixation on consumer and material pleasures. Sound familiar? In this world, natural reproduction has been abolished. Human beings are artificially created and conditioned for very specific roles in society in an unbreaking social hierarchy. From birth, individuals are predestined for a very specific caste, ranging from the intelligent and the privileged alphas to the menial, laboring epsilons. This rigid caste system ensures that everyone knows their place and remains content in their lot from birth to death. And if anyone ever gets a little upset, there's always soma to calm them down and keep them in their place. So just like I did a summary of Huxley, as I did a description of George Orwell, let's talk a little bit about Aldous Huxley. I mean, he was a prolific writer, but he was also a very keen observer, and especially of things like the human condition, where life experiences and insights shaped one of the most chilling dystopian visions ever penned. And like Orwell, he was born into, middle class, well off, not super rich household, but Huxley maybe a little better off. I mean, his family name was more well known, and he was surrounded by intellectual types, from a very early age. He was raised in a family that included his grandfather, Thomas Huxley. He was a pretty famous biologist, and his father was an editor, and he was an author. Aldous was destined basically for a life of intellectual pursuit because that's what he grew up and that's what he knew. But Huxley's path wasn't without its challenges. At the age of 16, he got an eye disease that left him nearly blind for 2 to 3 years. This really shaped his worldview, and it influenced his fascination with the human mind and perception. Huxley also was educated at Eton College, and it exposed him to a broad set of ideas and philosophies. And his early works really focused on literature and science. Still, it was his experiences during the roaring 20s and the disillusionment of the post-World War I era that impacted him the most. So there's a difference there. Whereas with Orwell, we see a lot of his personal experiences that shaped him was war. It was seeing the fascists. It was seeing imperialism up close and personal when he was overseas. It was World War II. Huxley, on the other hand, he was so impacted in the United States by the Roaring Twenties, and everyone knows the American history. Roaring Twenties were just the industrial age had spurred upon America. It was maybe a period of some of the greatest wealth and growth that the country has ever seen. And we had cars and washing machines and all kinds of personal luxuries coming into play. And the U.S. at that stage it began its rampant consumerism. And I mean, really, in the United States, we've never looked back from that moment forward. And so that profoundly impacted him. And then also just the World War I era, the post-World War I, and just the disillusionment of what governments can do. So Huxley travels to the U.S. in the 20s and 30s. This exposed him to this exploding culture of consumerism and industrialization, and he sees this rise of mass production, advertising, increased influence of technology, and he looks at this trajectory of human progress very critically, and the fact that maybe all the things of the world and the comforts of the industrial age, he starts to say, I'm not so sure these are so good for humanity. And these observations are absolutely pivotal when we read through Brave New World. It's like looking at the consumer society, the capitalistic consumerism of society, as a dehumanizing, a depersonalizing impact. And on the surface, sure, everything looks clean and shiny and new and fancy and easy, but underneath, there's this ugly undercurrent. And he envisions in his novel this society that is enslaved because it will not slow down its pursuit of pleasure and comfort and money. In fact, it could be argued the best way in the world to create slaves is not brute physical force, like we see a lot in 1984, but rather quiet, complacent submission for the sake of $1, or even just a simple hedonistic pleasure, whether that pleasure would just be random sex, whether it would be drugs, whether it would be buying something. Because in Huxley's world, this was the way. This was the best way for a government to control everyone and everything, ultimately. In Huxley's Brave New World, published in 1932, it's kind of a satirical masterpiece, actually, and that delves into the potential consequences of unchecked technological advancement and the loss of individuality. Now, let me talk about satire for just 1 minute. I absolutely love satire, and the meme culture. I think it's so good. I love it. But one thing it does is it just cuts to the bone in a way that we can all understand yet laugh about. In the literary field, satire uses humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose criticism and to expose, maybe criticize human voices, follies, and societal issues without being, an obnoxious yelling in your face way, but trying to use humor to do it, which is very powerful. So Huxley uses some of these techniques inside of Brave New World. And so, for Brave New World, Huxley, as we're going to see, he has a couple of ways. Number one, he critiques consumerism and materialism. He exaggerates the obsession with consumption and material comfort in the world state, as it's called. And you're going to see some of these characters. I mean, we have some rather soft, woke individuals in our society today. We do. I mean, we just do. And you're definitely going to see that potential and some of that here in this particular novel. Irony and exaggeration. The novel's rich, just rich with irony. For example, the use of the drug soma represents an exaggerated form of escapism and state control. And the irony lies in the fact that while the citizens are perpetually happy and content, they are completely what they call happy and content, but they are devoid, like brain dead, devoid of individuality, critical thinking, and genuine emotions. And, parodying, we'll read some parodies of these utopian ideals. So the world state, it presents itself as this ideal society where everyone is happy and all their needs are met. However, this utopia is so deeply flawed and it's ugly. It's got a very ugly underbelly because truth, happiness, freedom, they're gone. And, for all the shiny facades, the fact that human beings are manufactured from the womb forward to just serve the state is a pretty ugly underbelly there. And then social and political commentary. Brave New World has a very biting commentary on various social and political issues, such as that loss of individuality, which is so key for Huxley, and this manipulation of science and technology. And science and technology is, in our society today, one of the biggest issues, and the trivialization of human relationships. Study after study will come out and show that 60% of people where they live, they don't even know their neighbors' names. The dehumanization of relationships is a big one. So, although the writing styles in Orwell's 84 and Huxley's Brave New World, they approach the problem and they write very, very differently, they still both pack a very powerful punch. And both of them illuminate a reality that we can all relate to them. Huxley, talking about his novel, he once said this, quote, "The real hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear to be most normal. Many of them are normal because they are so well adjusted to our mode of existence, because their human voice has been silenced so early in their lives that they do not even struggle or suffer or develop symptoms as the neurotic does." His later works even continue to explore themes of consciousness and spirituality and the human condition, which only solidify this reputation as a real forward-thinking defender of freedom and independence. In the end, his insights into this interplay between science and society and human nature, they're really as relevant for us today, and we're going to look at examples of that as they were nearly, a century ago. So 1984 and Brave New World, they're not just dusty old books, but they're vital roadmaps for understanding our present and shaping our future. We are, in so many ways, already living out the dystopian fantasy of Orwell and Huxley. So what are we going to do about it? How will we end up, or will we end up in the same doomed predicaments of our heroes that we're going to study, Winston and Julia in 1984, or Bernard in Brave New World? I sure hope not. But in many ways, the ideas that we're going to study in this series from Huxley and Orwell, it's almost like these two are whispering in our ears from the grave to beware about the future. At the end of our series together, whether the world is like, whether or not you perceive the world to be like Orwell, one that's of state surveillance and physical as well as mental control, where truth is a flexible commodity and real privacy is non-existence and nobody can believe a word that is spoken anywhere. Or maybe by the end of the series, you're going to see that our lives are more like Huxley's world, where any problem in life is smothered by a pill And individuality is nothing but a relic from the past, a world where society voluntarily gives up its freedom and autonomy in exchange for pleasures and things and stability and drugs and random sex, where this relentless pursuit of pleasure is more important than anything. The choice which dystopian version is more like our present reality is of course up to you, and you may find, wow, it's both of them combined, or it's one more than the other. But in the end, I think you see either world is horrifying if we stop to think about it. So I hope you stay with me, and I hope you join me next week as we go deeper into the rabbit hole. And we're going to uncover how the past foretold our present, and it's going to help us predict the future. As we're going to get into totalitarianism in a whole different level, and I think it's going to bring new things that maybe you never even considered to light. But until then, stay curious and keep decoding the world around you. And thanks for joining.